these are some just general quotes that I like when I think about brainstorming. Perfection is the enemy of ideation. You're not trying to get it perfect right now. You're trying to cross-pollinate. You can apply these principles at any time, not just brainstorming for biodesign projects, but all throughout your life. And it's a very iterative process. This is not something that you're just going to do once today here. We want you to carry this through as you continue your work in this class. So again, as Lynn mentioned, we need to be very, very mindful of the process, where we are in the process. You have just focused down your needs. You've defined your need criteria. You're in a mental state of defining and focusing. But where we are today is actually in a flare state, right? We are trying to go really big, go for quantity, and have lots of different ideas. So you need to turn off your analytical part of your brain and your down selection part of your brain and make sure you can actually flare. And we'll help you with that by showing you kind of how to brainstorm, the rules of brainstorming, and some of the exercises that you can do. Okay, so why do we brainstorm? The reason that we brainstorm is to separate ideas from decisions, right? You don't want to be constantly having an idea and then making a decision about it, having an idea and making a decision about it. You want to be having lots of ideas. You want to have that you want to be in that generative mindset, and then start focusing down again as you're deciding which ideas you want to move forward with. So remember that the whole point of brainstorming is separation of ideas from decisions. Okay, there are lots of ways to ideate. So mind mapping, body storming, crowdsourcing. We're going to talk specifically about brainstorming today. What is brainstorming? It's a semi-structured, team-based approach to rapid idea generation. Semi-structured, it's not a free-for-all. It actually needs to be relatively well-defined when you go into a brainstorm. Team-based, that's why you're all here sitting in teams. And rapid idea generation, meaning that the idea is to really popcorn your ideas. So you're trying to not think about just one idea for a long meeting. A brainstorm is not a meeting. It is rapid idea generation. So you need to get into that mindset. Why are you doing this? You want to generate maximum innovation potential in a short amount of time. I know that this class goes very, very quickly. This ideation phase for you does not last very long. So brainstorming is the best way to generate that maximum innovation potential in this short amount of time. You want to make sure you're incorporating different perspectives. Because it's a team-based approach, you have your teammates, which are multidisciplinary, but you can also brainstorm by bringing in other individuals, experts in your field to help you brainstorm. The best part of brainstorming, I think, is really building excitement about what you're trying to solve, gaining alignment amongst your team members, and transferring ideas between people. So the classic rules of brainstorming, we'll go through this again, but I'm going to go through kind of just a quick brainstorming didactic beginning to end. And then what we're going to do today is actually go into the weeds and go through every part of the brainstorm. So the first rule is to defer judgment. As I said, separating ideas from decisions. Don't dismiss any ideas at this point. You want to make sure you're selecting the right people for the brainstorm and getting into the right mindset for the brainstorm. You want to encourage wild ideas. A lot of times great ideas hide right behind the goofy ones. You want to build on the ideas of others. So in the D school, we actually practice saying the actual words, yes, and, right? So somebody has an idea and you're building off of it, you say yes, and this, right? So that's a great thing to think about. I want to be saying yes, and all the time. You want to go for quantity. So try for one idea a minute. Make sure you have only one conversation at a time. You're staying focused on the topic, which means that you need to have a facilitator, and it's good to have a parking lot. So sometimes you have great ideas that are tangential to what you're discussing right at that point. The best thing to do is to have a little actual parking lot on your whiteboard where you park other ideas that are tangential to what you're discussing. And the most important, which is why we're here in the D school and why you have all of these sticky notes and Sharpies on your table, is you want to be visual. You use doodles, you want to have quick prototyping materials, you want to be able to physically cluster ideas. So make sure when you come out of this session and you go into your other brainstorming sessions, you're choosing an environment that allows for that. You have lots of space, you have lots of sticky notes, you have everything that you have here, basically. It's so simple, you know, a pad of sticky notes and a few Sharpies and an empty wall. That's really all you need for brainstorming, but make sure you're in that space that allows for that. Don't meet at a coffee shop to brainstorm, basically, is what I'm saying. So you're going to start with your need statement and your need criteria, and you're going to break it down. So you don't just put up your need statement and say, go, I'm going to brainstorm on this, right? You actually need to break it down and then make sure you know that you don't have to cover everything in one session. Brainstorming sessions should be pretty focused on one topic, and you can get pretty tired during a brainstorming session. Keep them relatively short, relatively focused, and make sure you schedule multiple brainstorming sessions to cover all of the topics that you want to cover. Okay, so you want to carefully consider how experts in the field can add or detract from brainstorming at different points in the process. So if you're going to invite an expert in the field to your brainstorm, sometimes they can be reflexively critical. So you want to be able to get them out of that mindset. They can be conservative because they can be stuck in their current practice. And sometimes they can be focused on like the next gen, the iterative thing, and maybe not the big ideas. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the right people for your brainstorm if you're inviting guests into your brainstorm. You also want to know your own biases. So maybe you've already fallen in love with an idea that you had in the shower last night. And your whole thinking today is, I'm going to sell this idea to the whole rest of my group. You need to know that that's okay, but you need to know that about yourself, and you need to get yourself out of that mindset as well and continue to make sure that you're building off your teammates' ideas still, and you're able to participate in the overall brainstorm. You want to look for people who can cross-pollinate, and you want to make sure that you have a facilitator for each part of the brainstorm. So I would suggest maybe not just having a facilitator for one whole brainstorm, because then that person doesn't get to participate in that entire brainstorm, but have change facilitators when you're brainstorming to each piece. The facilitator has a very important job, and you should take your job seriously. You're running the session, you're keeping track of time, you're enforcing the rules of brainstorming, making sure that people don't go off into tangents, making sure that people are not judging the ideas. You want the facilitator also helps to stimulate ideas. So they say a lot of, well, what if this or what if that? And they prevent lingering on a topic, but they're also kind of not a participant in a topical brainstorm. So they have a separate job from the actual brainstorm. When you're doing the session, you want to make sure that everyone is prepared. So everyone should come into the session understanding kind of what the need statement is, what the need criteria are, understanding the anatomy and physiology, having potential props if they can help you. I'm just gonna, it's great to have the 3 C's. I don't know if we have them here today, but candy, cookies, caffeine. We always say that those drive a good brainstorm. Make sure you have a good amount of uninterrupted time. I say 60 to 90 minutes for each brainstorming session, and maybe much shorter if you have to do an online brainstorming session. You always want to start with a warm-up. You want to push toward the positive in a brainstorm, and then make sure you capture the results. So take photos, save all your sticky notes. You want to transfer that to a mind map and take inventory of what topics might warrant further development. At the end of your brainstorm, don't wait until later. It's not going. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you're framing the question. So you want to convert your need statement and your criteria into a set of focus questions, which we call at the D School, how might we questions. So I'll go through how you write those questions, but these are very important to your brainstorm. And here is kind of an example of that. So let's say your need is a way to prevent stent thrombosis in patients requiring endovascular stenting who are contraindicated for antiplatelet anticoagulant therapy in order to reduce the complications of this APAC therapy. So it would be really hard to put this on top of a whiteboard and say, go, solve this problem. right? So instead, you're going to break down this need statement into a number of how might we questions, which are things like, how might we treat stenosis without stents? How might we reduce or prevent the complications of antiplatelet, anticoagulant therapy? How might we prevent thrombosis altogether? How might we better predict whether APAC therapy will lead to complications for each patient? How might we prevent cardiovascular disease? So you can see that these how might we questions are built off of this need statement and they can broaden the need statement, so they can broaden the potential solutions that you brainstorm, or they can kind of narrow them down and focus on one piece of the need statement. So that's what we'll be doing today. Bless you. And then when you're doing your concept generation, there are multiple ways to structure this. So you can structure it by technology platforms. You can look at the mechanism of disease or anatomy. You can look at the cycle of care, so prevention, treatment, post-op. You can look at the different stakeholders, and you can look at potential business models. These ways of structuring concept generation help you when you're stuck, right? So for example, if you are in a brainstorm and you're brainstorming a how might we question, and you see that all of your ideas are in one specific space, you can step yourself back and say, oh, maybe we go like earlier in the cycle of care or later in the cycle of care. So for example, if your how might we statement is something like, how might we prevent thrombosis? And you were to structure this from a technology platform perspective, you might be brainstorming all of these chemical biological ideas. And then you could step back and say, hey, how might we do this from an electrical point of view or a mechanical point of view? And then it helps you also kind of organize your ideas in that way. And it gives you more topics to brainstorm when your brainstorm is kind of reaching a lull. So the first part of every brainstorm is a warm-up. And the reason that warm-ups are so important is because they help you become mentally and physically active, which is really important from a brainstorm, but they also help you transition from being in whatever mind space you are to being in a brainstorming mindset. So if you think about your team members, like some of them might have come from work at the hospital, some of them might have come from a final, some of them might have come from a nap, right? So they're all in a different space. They might be super relaxed, they might be super stressed out. And so the warm-up is really kind of, it can be fun, it can be silly, but it's a way to get everyone on the same page. So don't ever discount the practice of doing a warm-up. I want everyone to when you meet for brainstorms, make sure that you're always doing some sort of warm-up. It's really, really, really important. So you can find these types of warm-ups online. You may know some already, but it's really great to make sure that everyone participates and you get in kind of in the mindset of paying attention to each other and building off your ideas. Okay, so now we're going to go to framing the question. So again, we talked about this already from a high level, but now we're going to kind of dive deeper and talk about how might we questions. So how might we questions are short statements that are built off of need statements or need criteria. So both your need statements and your need criteria are good fodder for how might we questions to launch brainstorms. Again, like I said, you don't want to just start from your need statement and say, okay, we're going to just brainstorm this. That would be a really unfocused brainstorm. These are some really great things to think about when you're writing your how might we questions. So increasing the good, removing the bad, exploring the opposite, questioning an assumption. My personal favorite is actually going after adjectives. So remember, you had every single piece of your need statement is well thought out. You chose every word very carefully. And so if there are certain adjectives or adverbs or descriptors that you have used in your need statement, why did you gravitate toward those? So going after adjectives is a good one. Looking for unexpected resources, I really like as well. And looking for a similar environment or ideal can be really helpful as well. So drawing an analogous situation. So here's an example of how things like that work. So here's a situation of, we're not talking medical anymore. Here's a situation of a mom who's at the airport and she's just come off a really long flight with her 3 kids. They're all really tired. and she's being told that her next flight is delayed 5 hours, right? So this poor mom is frazzled. She has to wait now with her kids. And the problem statement, which is just analogous to your need statement, is something like, fellow passengers already frustrated by waiting at the gate were additionally irritated by a stressed mother's annoying little brat, right? So now let's think about how we can use the things that we just talked about to generate need statements, or how might we statements, sorry. So increasing the good. So an example of increasing the good might be something like, how might we use the kids' energy to entertain the fellow passengers? Removing the bad might be something like, how might we separate the kids from fellow passengers? Exploring the opposite might be something like, how might we make the wait the most exciting part of the trip for people? Questioning an assumption would be something like, how might we entirely remove the wait time at the airport? So this is a really interesting, there's an interesting story behind this, and maybe some of you have heard this before, but one of the airlines was getting a lot of flack for how long it took for the luggage to come out after a flight in a luggage, in a luggage carousel. And so the question, how might we entirely remove the wait time at the airport? Their passengers were getting super frustrated because they get to the luggage carousel and they feel like they have to wait for like 20 minutes before their luggage came out. So their solution to this problem was just moving the luggage carousel to the farthest possible place from the gate. So instead of having to wait at the luggage carousel, people were just walking the whole time. And then they didn't feel like, and then once they got to their luggage carousel, their luggage was there because they had to walk 20 minutes to get there. So that is like a way that like this type of question like generated that sort of interesting solution, right? So looking for unexpected resources, how might we leverage free time of fellow passengers to share the load? Looking for similar environments and creating an analogy, how might we make the airport more like a spa? How might we make the airport more like a playground? A great analogy in the medical space, a lot of times people liken the ER to like a pit crew in racing, right? So finding analogous situations sometimes can help you build ideas and generate ideas. Sometimes your team might need to brainstorm online in order to include everyone. The rules of brainstorming virtually are a little bit different, okay? So you have to make use of kind of different tools because you don't have the same energy when you're doing this online. So the first piece is to do actually a little bit of what we call solo storming. So make sure you're taking the time, advantage of the time that you have together when you're online to share out ideas and go around the table. But in order to do that, you need to have a few ideas first. You can also do this when you're brainstorming in person, to take a few minutes, look at the how might we, and before you start populating ideas from everyone, maybe like have a couple of minutes to have your own ideas and then start popcorning. But it's really important when you're doing an online brainstorm to take some time before that brainstorm to generate a few ideas on your own, because you don't have kind of the same energy. You can also use asynchronous communication, so you can take advantage of things like Slack or live chat outside of the brainstorm to continue to build on your ideas. You need to be more cognizant of time when you're on like a Zoom brainstorm. So most online brainstorming sessions, you should set them for like 30 or 45 minutes. In person, I think you can go like an hour and a half sometimes. You want to make sure that everyone's staying focused, engaged, and included. It's just so easy to get distracted when you're sitting there in front of your computer and everyone's just sitting there looking at a tiny screen. It's just not the same feeling. Again, you want to make sure you're taking the role seriously again when you're doing this. If you're doing it over online, the facilitator should still move the brainstorm along. Even if you're online, you want to maybe have another person helping to log and organize your ideas online, because you don't have necessarily like the same type of sticky note like quickness with posting sticky notes. People use things like Miro to do online. So as you kind of brainstorm, you want to be ideating, you want to be in big concept generation mode. And then the next piece is really about your initial concept selection. So you're gonna, again, go from flare to focus. And you want to have an objective, comprehensive method for organizing and evaluating your ideas in order to go from many concepts to a few. So you want to be able to take stock of the ideas in an organized way, review your raw output immediately after your brainstorming session, and make sure you're doing the legwork to fill in the gaps. What you did today was a practice session, right? This gets you kind of going, you know what you're doing now, but it's very unlikely that your final idea came out of what you did today. So you need to do the legwork to continue to fill in the gaps in your concept. So it's really great. I think you probably know how to do this already, but obviously you can cluster ideas. You can use concept mapping to get visuals on your ideas. So clustering, right? You can cluster by blue sky, mixed, incremental, and then the type of concept, mechanical, electrical, pharmacologic. The reason that you would want to cluster ideas is so that you can identify big gaps. So what you want for the next few brainstorms and classes is to come up with 3 unique concepts, which means that the concepts should not be similar to each other. It shouldn't just be variations of the same theme. You should be thinking very broadly in terms of your concept. And the reason that that's really useful is because as you go through the biodesign process, there will be things that will kill your concept, whether it be IP or regulatory or whatever it may be, or a technical difficulty. And if 2 of your concepts are too close together, then that one thing can easily kill both of your concepts, right? So then you're only left with one. So really, really try to do the legwork to come up with 3 very unique concepts for your need statements. So how do you actually start filtering? Of course, you're going to compare your ideas to the need statement and your need criteria. So you have all of your ideas. As you're starting to cluster and group, then you start comparing your groups and your clusters against whether, first and foremost, do these concepts meet your need statement, right? So don't change your need statement because you fell in love with the concept. This is a big, huge no-no in biodesign, as you know. And so make sure you know whether the concepts meet the need statement, and then you want to assess whether your concepts meet your must-have need criteria, and then your nice-to-have need criteria. And that's how you filter down, and that's where concepts start falling out, right? Again, never revise the need statement to fit a solution. So you want to hold a solution selection meeting or session, and then you can also help to validate your ideas by kind of interviewing targeted experts. If there's physicians that you're working with for your need, you can start talking about these concepts, from a very high level to kind of get some validation there.